Story recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a horror and thriller movie called Pathology. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. In a morgue, a group of medical residents uses corpses like puppets to reenact the famous scene from When Harry Met Sally. Elsewhere, Dr. Ted Gray is in bed with his girlfriend Gwen. She laments about not seeing him for 3 months, and Ted teasingly threatens her with marriage. Eventually, he leaves town to join one of the nation's most prestigious pathology residency programs. When Ted arrives at the Metropolitan University Medical Center, he's immediately greeted by Dr. Ben Stravinsky. Ben shows Ted to the county morgue where the unexplained deaths within the city limits end up. They arrive at a pathology room where doctors cut open the corpses for autopsy. While passing by doctors Juliet Bath and Jake Gallo, Ben whispers that there are annoying people in this room. Hearing this, Jake powers on a bone saw loudly, but Ben politely tells Ted to shrug it off. Later, Ted and Ben attend one of Dr. Quentin Morris's lectures about the philosophy of pathology. While Ted listens, he's reminded that a pathologist must always work backward until they reach the original, pristine design of the human body and determine the cause of death. Shortly after, Ted approaches Morris, who's a friend of Gwen's father. He tells Ted that he's quite privileged to bag someone like her. Just then, Jake walks into the auditorium, so Morris introduces the two young doctors to each other. He tells Jake that Ted graduated at the top of his class at Harvard and was accepted to the UNICEF program in Lagos, where he has been for the past 4 months. Morris calls Ted the young star among the residents who single-handedly solved the Horton family murders. Seeing the tension between the two men, Morris reminds them to get along well. Later on, Ted joins Jake and his team in the pathology room. There, Jake diagnoses an 11-year-old boy's condition, saying that the cause of death is kidney failure. However, Ted argues that the boy died during a state of hypoxia and an asthma attack. He adds that the kid was bullied for gaining weight due to his asthma medication. Ted points out that there are no traces of the medicine in his blood or urine, but Dr. Griffin Kavanaugh mocks him. After telling Griffin off, Morris tells Ted to continue. Ted figures that the kid stopped taking his medicine, so he died from a severe attack. He ends this by saying that they shouldn't overlook psychology in their diagnosis. Pissed, Jake walks out of the room. As Ted is heading home later, Griffin intentionally bumps into him. Getting his attention, Griffin declares that the team doesn't like him. As usual, Ted keeps his head high and replies that it's not a problem. The next day at work, Ted notices Juliet staring at him. However, he focuses on the subject, which is a man who experienced frequent pain and nausea while urinating before his death. Suddenly, the body starts to rattle uncontrollably, so Ted takes a scalpel and stabs it into the man's nape. The others mock him for killing the patient, but Morris explains that he simply disconnected the man's nerves from his brain, allowing the body to calm down. Morris praises Ted for this, much to Jake's annoyance. Later that night, Ted notices Jake's group of friends and sees Jake hugging Juliet. Because of this, he assumes that they're in a relationship. The following day, Jake makes a speech about how more people should die instead of spending their lives doing worthless things. He asks Ted if he agrees, but he only says he sees his point. After work, Jake invites Ted to join him and his friends at the bar. Ted agrees, and later that night, he quietly tries to get along with everyone. Once again, Juliet flirtatiously looks at him. As they drink, Dr. Catherine Ivy asks the group who they would kill if given a chance. Dr. Chip Bentwood makes a joke out of this, but Jake wants to hear what Ted has to say. Ted bluntly replies that he thinks everyone in the group is stupid because, as pathologists, they should already know that killing doesn't need a motive because it comes naturally. Jake thinks this is hilarious, and later that night, the group ditches Ted. The following night, Jake goes on a drunken carpool with Ted. Afterward, they head to a brothel but struggle to get in because of the stubborn guard. After some bribing, they finally get inside, and Jake gets excited to get his money's worth. However, Ted refuses to participate and ends up passing out. The next day, Ted is shocked upon realizing that their subject is the guard from the brothel. He walks out to compose himself, regretting the events of last night. Later, Ted gives his diagnosis, claiming that the man died from potassium cyanide poisoning. He adds that the chemical goes undetected on standard tests, so the killer easily made it look like the man was butchered instead of poisoned. After that, the killer waited 7 hours before stabbing the man 18 times and then shooting him in the back of the head. Oddly enough, Jake agrees with Ted and adds that the killer might have injected the chemical directly into the heart. After getting dismissed, Jake tells Ted to meet him at the morgue tonight. As Ted is about to leave, Ben praises him for his genius diagnosis. Annoyed, Jake throws a piece of liver on Ben's head. That night, Jake takes Ted to the guard's body. Ted blatantly accuses Jake of killing the man, and he doesn't deny this. He justifies that the man was a criminal and the woman working at the brothel was his own grandmother. After this, he challenges Ted and asks him how the man died. However, Ted is still sure about his previous diagnosis, and when Jake questions this, he calls him a serial killer. This offends Jake, so he tells him to leave before the others arrive. As Ted makes his way out, he sees the rest of Jake's friends entering the facility. Later that night, he calls Jake and asks why he trusted him with the crime he committed. Jake simply reminds him that he was there when the man died, and he can easily make it look like he was the one who did it. He then adds that Ted shouldn't stop because he hasn't played the game yet. The following day, Ted approaches Jake and says that the man died from nitric acid, not potassium cyanide. He also didn't inject it with a needle but mixed it with flavored beer. Hearing this, Jake gets impressed and tells Ted that he also needs to bring something to the table if he wants to play the game. The next day, Juliet gives Ted his first victim, a man who shot his wife and 2 kids. After that, he shot himself in the throat and the stomach, but managed to survive. Although Ted hesitates to join the game, he visits the man in the hospital, where he plots how to kill him. As Ted goes home that night, he refuses to help an old woman who's suffering from a heart attack, as if letting go of his responsibilities as a doctor. The following day, Ted finally decides to execute his plan. He dresses as a nurse, and when he gets to the man's room, he injects his ear with poison, killing him. After that, Ted goes to work, and Jake assures him that he'll get over the guilt that he's feeling. When that subsides, he'll become a new man. Later, Ted joins Jake and the other residents to explore the body of the man he killed. Everyone else comes in high, and they urge Ted to try out the substances. Afterward, they play with the corpse, and Ted only watches them as he feels the effects kicking in. The following night, Juliet asks Ted to help her with her contribution to the game. Her target is her own father, who violated her when she was just a girl. Upon visiting the man with Ted, Juliet gives her dad recreational substances, which excites him. Then, Ted hands him a bottle of liquid nitrogen, and the man consumes it, thinking it's another type of recreational medicine. This freezes his lungs, and Juliet smashes a beer can into his chest, shattering his organs. At the peak of their overwhelming emotions, Juliet and Ted copulate in front of the man's lifeless body. The next day, the others gather to discuss how the man died. However, Jake knows that Juliet isn't capable of performing such a sleek job. Later on, he confronts Ted and reminds him to play fair. Before leaving, he also reveals that Juliet made up the story about her father. In reality, her father is alive and is a chairman of a famous banking institution. Enraged, Ted finds Juliet and threatens her not to mess with him again. Days pass, and the team continues with their secret game. As they do this, they indulge in medication and partying. Meanwhile, Ted regularly sleeps with Juliet in the morgue. Days later, Morris talks with Ted and tells him that it's quite obvious he's using substances. He adds that he plans to give him his highest recommendations, so he reminds Ted to reset his priorities. He also advises him to spend time away from Jake. Later that night, Ted goes home to find Juliet in his apartment. He reminds her that he's spending the holidays with his fiancée, but this doesn't discourage Juliet from sleeping with him that night. The following day, Ted heads to Gwen's house. There, he talks with Gwen's father, who reminds him about their plan and how his current job will allow him to work in DC. That night, Ted makes love to Gwen while Juliet sleeps with Jake on a building rooftop. However, their lovemaking session is a little too intense, and Juliet even punches Jake and pricks needles into his body. Later on, Gwen tells Ted that she can finally move in with him in his apartment. She plans on taking the bar exams in the city, so it would be efficient to stay with him. This troubles Ted, but he tells her it'll be incredible. A few days later, Gwen moves in with Ted. However, she notices a tiny bong in his apartment, so she confronts him about it. Ted quickly comes up with an excuse, saying that he's holding it for another resident. Although she seems a little suspicious, Gwen shrugs this off and tells him to prepare for the party that they're going to later that night. At the party, they see Ben, and Gwen instantly likes him. Just then, Jake and Juliet approach Ted, so Ben excuses himself, unwilling to deal with the two. Jake starts talking about death casually, and Gwen quickly becomes uncomfortable with him and Juliet. Because of this, Ted excuses himself and Gwen to talk to Morris. After they leave, Jake catches Juliet staring at Ted with jealousy. Because of this, he makes a scene and tells her to go with him, but she must remember who she belongs to. However, Juliet says she doesn't belong to anyone and walks out. Angry, Jake smashes some wine glasses on the floor. After the party, as Ted and Gwen prepare to sleep, he receives a call to go to the morgue. As he arrives, he's horrified upon seeing Jake drenched in blood. Then, he discovers 3 women in the room, bloody and lifeless. Jake seems ecstatic, but Ted can't process why he killed them. Unhinged, Jake aims his blade at Ted, yelling that Juliet doesn't know him, but he does. To change the topic, Ted reminds him about the game, so he guesses how the women died. Assuming that's what Jake called him for, he gets them all right, and Jake gets excited about every correct answer. However, Ted tells him that his methods weren't clever, angering Jake. Still, they focus on getting rid of the bodies. Shortly after, he returns to his apartment and finds Juliet waiting for him in the lobby. Ted is enraged and tells her that Jake just killed 3 women. However, Juliet says she's done with Jake. She begins to undo Ted's belt to give him head. Unbeknownst to them, Jake is watching them from his car and quickly drives away. Soon, however, Ted pushes Juliet off and returns to Gwen. The next day, Ted tells Jake that he wants to quit the game. However, Jake calmly says that no one is allowed to leave. Threatened by his calm demeanor, Ted apologizes and agrees to stay. Before leaving, Jake tells Ted that they'll have an important meeting tomorrow night, and he shouldn't miss it. The following night, Ted tells Gwen that he'll be out for a few hours. Meanwhile, everyone except Juliet and Ted is at the morgue. Noticing this, the group all agreed that they should get rid of the two. With that, Jake reveals that their subject for the night is Juliet. Everyone is too shocked to make a comment, but Chip loudly expresses that it's messed up. Hearing this, Jake snaps back at him, so Chip complies with opening up Juliet's body. However, he first grabs his bong to give him courage in doing the job. As Jake is about to turn the operating lights on, he notices gas leaking. Before he can say anything, Chip has already lit up his lighter, making the room explode. As his colleagues burn, Ted appears to check the scene before walking away. Realizing that quitting the game isn't an option, he decided to eliminate everyone else playing it. The next day, Ted goes to work as if nothing happened. As he arrives, Morris greets him with the news about the explosion. The bodies of Griffin, Ivy, Juliet, and one unidentified person were found at the scene. Hearing this, Ted realizes that he failed to kill Jake. Immediately, he rushes to his apartment, where Gwen is. As he makes his way there, Jake knocks on Ted's apartment door, and Gwen opens it for him. By the time Ted arrives, Gwen already lies dead on the bed. Ted can only cry in despair as he embraces his fiance's lifeless body. Later, Morris approaches Ted and says that the police see Jake as a potential suspect. He also expresses his condolences regarding Gwen and says that he still couldn't figure out how she died. Hearing this, Ted volunteers to do the autopsy since he had already asked permission from Gwen's parents. After this, Ted heads to the pathology room and opens up Gwen's body. He thoroughly inspects it, and he writes down his findings. After completing everything, he leaves the room. The following day, Ted works on Gwen's case until he's left alone in the pathology room. Just then, Jake appears and knocks him unconscious. Later on, Ted wakes up with his hands tied. Jake is furious upon finding Ted's autopsy results on Gwen's death. Everything is inaccurate, and he's mad that his sublime work has been made a joke. Jake, who sees Ted as his only critic and rival, refuses to believe that this is the best that Ted could do. Still, Jake declares that he won since Ted couldn't figure out Gwen's death. This makes Ted laugh, revealing that he only wrote something convincing to not freak out Gwen's parents. But in reality, he has a theory. He believes that Jake covered her mouth with a cloth soaked in chloroform. Just then, Ben suddenly appears behind Jake and does exactly this. With Jake immobilized, Ted continues his theory and adds that he injected potassium into Gwen's body before dripping nitroglycerin on her tongue. Once again, Ben does the same methods on Jake before freeing Ted. As Ted stands before Jake's immobilized body, he adds that he let Gwen die slowly, which took about 7 minutes. This is the average time until a person falls asleep. Within that time, she could hear everything Jake said to her. With 6 minutes and 30 seconds remaining until Jake dies, Ted opens up his body. Jake is still alive and conscious, but since he's immobile, all he can do is suffer from the excruciating pain.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.